All right, so live code review Friday. Recording is on. You take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
So, yeah, so this right here is a little flashcard application. It's based off of a Team Treehouse tutorial. It was extremely helpful in just kind of wrapping my mind around Express. So I'm just here today to share with y'all kind of about that. I don't need to go to that. Or this place. Where is the? There we go. One. Yeah, so I'm just going to be going over the basics of routes, a little bit of cookies, and some pug. Yeah, so let's get started. So first things first, this application has a very, very rudimentary kind of authentication system. How that works is through just kind of routes and cookies. So the first part is if you try to...
Can I ask you a favor?
Yeah, sure, what's up?
Do you mind just giving us a demo of the app, like just in the browser before we go to the code, just to kind of give us all an idea of what the code we're about to look at accomplishing?
Oh, no, I was going to kind of try to go through both because like right now what's happening is when it goes to the index, so if I just go to localhost 3000, it automatically redirects me to this hello view.
Cool.
Which is requiring me to sign in because I don't have a cookie, right? So that's what this whole part right here is. It says when it gets through the index, when it receives that initial URL of just localhost, it's looking for a request or like a cookie from the request object coming into the actual server itself. So if it doesn't have one, it redirects me to the hello route. And when I'm getting the hello route, it kind of has the same situation. So if I were to go into hello, and if I had a cookie, it would then redirect me back to the index. Otherwise, it would render the hello page. Now, the hello page right here is what you see in front of you. It's just a form with an action that posts to the hello route, and it submits a username. So with that in mind, if I submit my username, welcome username, let's get started. So it redirects me back to the localhost 3000. As you can see, it's the index page, it's not the hello page, and that part of the route disappeared. So if I begin, cool, just shows me different flashcards. Those are decided through the cards route. Really quick though, I'm going to go on a little bit more of this whole back-end part. This right here is requiring the Express server. This right here is the body parser. Now body parser takes a response object from the server. So there's, in the anatomy of an HTTP, it always kind of follows along in this request response cycle where the client sends a request and then the server receives that request and then parses it through whatever middleware is desired based off of the request parameters or any headers that you set, things like that. So for example, up here in the URL, it's going to the cards route. It's getting the ID, and it's telling you what side it's on. As you can see, like what is one way to a website can store data in a user's browser. If I flip it, it makes another request and sets the side state to answer, which is kind of cool. And then every time I click this next button, it randomly selects an ID from the array or from the cards, the cards object.
Gotcha. So where were you with the body parser middleware? Can you say again what the body parser middleware is doing?
Yeah, it let's see if we go back to here, it's giving me a request body. So if I come to here, and I type in something like that and submit it, Michael is awesome comes back to me in a or it goes to the server in that request body. It's essentially just formatting the whole request object into kind of just like the bits of data that you need.
Gotcha. So it's taking the body of the HTTP request and it is adding it into the request object, like in a convenient place where you can grab it.
Exactly. So you don't have to. It just grabs it and it makes it more accessible.
You're using that in the in that home, that slash route, then I guess.
Yep.
Right?
Yes. In
index. Yeah. Okay. So when you say
when I post through the form,
request, so it's giving you that request.body object.
Yep.
It's parsing out all that from
exactly, and then it's turning that into the cookie, and then the cookie is essentially taking the place of that. The cookie is taking the place of the request body. Now it just has all of that stored inside of the cookie, which it is then sending every time the client makes a request.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Which is really cool. What should I knew about cookies months ago. Anyways, going on to it. So in our app.js, we are saying use main routes. So every time it's searching for like a URL based off of a request object, or it's looking for like some kind of middleware, it first goes through here in the main routes. If it can't find anything, it goes through the card routes. So it's saying app use main routes and app use the card routes. And if it can't find any of these routes, so if I were to edit this and be like, I don't know, Fay, it sends me down right here into this kind of error catching system, which tells me that it responded with the 404, it's not found, and then it's using the next function to send me to my error handler. And this error handler prints things out over here. It's saying that it's giving me a local error response object. It's rendering the status of whatever the error is, and it's sending that to the error page in Pug, which essentially is just this little message right here, which is taking the error message, whatever status it is, and putting it right here.
Gotcha.
Cool.
So that can you go back to that the code? Yeah, the code for that error page.
Yeah, 1 second.
I'm sorry, not the template, but the route. Sorry, the route did like
Okay.
the error catch all. Yeah. So the response.locals.error equals error. What is that doing again?
If I'm exposing my ignorance here, I'm actually not 100% sure. But from what I understand, the response.locals is kind of it's creating some kind of local object, like saying something about the error. I'm not 100% sure though.
Gotcha.
We could look that up really quick.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I haven't seen it before. I am like expert, so I saw that. I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. I wonder what that does. Genuinely curious. App.local. Okay, so they are
Local variables within the application. One set, the value of app.locals property persists through the life of the application, in contrast with response local properties that are only valid for the lifetime of the request.
so it's just you're just setting it as like some state, and I guess maybe your error template uses that or something. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Happen every day. Okay, cool. So what's next?
Yeah. So a little bit of the card functionality. What happens is because app.use down here is setting this route to /cards, every time, just check. Yeah, all of this was just provided by Team Treehouse. It's their designer did all this. It was kind of like part of the challenge was to convert an HTML page into a Pug layout using like Pug to its fullest benefits, kind of a thing, which was a interesting challenge. But yeah, so whenever it's saying use any of the card routes, it's essentially telling it, it's essentially saying anytime I make a request to these routes, append the /cards. So if I were to do this, it would have the same functionality, just extended kind of, yeah.
Gotcha. So it's prefixing that string onto the front of any of the routes defined in
cards. Exactly. That's a good way to kind of separate your, I guess, the functionality of your, just like your main part of your server, so you can see, I guess, directly more where errors are happening. If it's like a server, like main, everything is going to explode kind of a thing, or is it just a kind of issue within specific parts of your routes? If that makes any sense. Okay, cool. So first off, it has, when I get just like the regular cards route, what it does is it declares a number of cards, which is essentially just grabbing this data object and getting the length of it. It comes up with a random number for the ID, and then it redirects to this cards route over here, which is using an object literal template. So this number right here is whichever random number that it's coming up with. So if you look down to the actual, get rid of this part just so we can see the URL a little bit better. Cool. So it's cards, and then the ID for this card in particular is 4. And then it's making a query through the request object, which is asking whatever side or what side the object is on currently. What you call it? And if it doesn't have a specific side, it just redirects you to the ID where the side is questioned. So that way, when I get a new card and like the side isn't really necessarily defined, it just automatically brings you to the question. So if I were to kind of scroll through here, every time I click, it's going to bring me onto a side that's looking at the question until I press this button over here, which is setting the state to flip the side over. So if you look at the URL, it's going from side question, answer, question, answer. And all that logic's kind of happening in here, where it's saying template data is the ID, text, and name of what you call it, coming from the data object. Okay, cool. All right. The hint is the hint in the data, and the text is looking at the cards with the ID and whatever side it's handed.
Cool.
Yeah. And going into the Pug, it's kind of interesting because I've been struggling with Pug my entire time here at Learners Guild, trying to figure out exactly how to make includes and block and all that other crap work. But it's a lot easier than I initially thought. With these includes, you're able to kind of put your static header and like a little paragraph, like so this header right here appears on every single one of my views, and so does this, and the footer should appear on some of the views, but not all of them.
So how do you get that header to appear on all the views? You define it in that header.pug file, and then okay, and then you're referencing it in this like layout file.
Yep.
Gotcha. And then where is this layout file referenced? So if I say like render card.pug, is that layout file like explicitly called out in this one? Oh, extends app.pug.
Yeah, let's see, where is it actually? Index. So the layout is the layout isn't necessarily defined anywhere. Nobody ever really calls the layout. Layout is you can, like, cool little tricks and tips that I've seen is including the just link for your style sheet, so you can kind of, instead of, like, let's say your jQuery CDN or like your kind of link to go and access jQuery for your application, if that goes to crap, instead of kind of changing the URL in 7 different places, you can just put it here. Same thing with your style sheet. If you change like the folder structure of your style sheet, you can just change it in one place, and then it goes everywhere. So this is saying it includes the header and the footer and a block of content called main. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing is main, it has block content and it includes the footer. So that's why I didn't necessarily need to have the footer right here. So that means anytime that I call block, anytime I call a block, it extends it into wherever I want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Can you open app.pug? That's being referenced in like most of your files.
Oh yeah, block.main. Cool.
So that's where you reference layout, extends layout.
Exactly. So it extends the layout. It has whatever's in the main block right here, and then it this is where like all the you actually do if-else statements inside of Pug too. So it's essentially saying if there is if there is that name cookie, this is referencing the username cookie. Mm-hmm. It tells you welcome based off this little object literal right here. And then it gives you the chance to log out, or it says hello student. Mm-hmm. That part's right here. And then it has a block for the intro and a block for the cards. And this is the kind of cards block right here that's all buggy and messed up right now. So hello extends the application and is essentially the intro block. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. That's the main part of the Pug, is defining where things start and end as kind of either children or as children of whatever indentation you put it into.
Right.
That's the only real tricky part about it. But yeah, no, these blocks are very useful.
Cool. So, excuse me.
Is there any other questions?
Anybody on the call have questions?
I do, actually. I wanted to know, can you say more about how block is being used in your pug files? Is it setting up sections, or are you like, is it literally like, is it setting up sections?
Yeah, no, it's setting up different sections that are kind of dynamic, which is awesome. So I think about it like React components, if you've ever messed around with React before, where it's saying based off the state of the application inside of the URL over here, render these specific views. That's one key difference with the using a template engine versus using HTML is especially in like the response objects is that's this whole part right here where it's setting the view engine to pug. You need to, it renders back a template. So it renders it going through all the different, okay, let's go to the beginning. If I go to hello, and then I delete my little cookie. Get out of here, cookie. Cool. So let's just like walk through one by one, just so I can kind of help, I guess, in my mind, kind of like help explain everything to you. So as we're going through, we start at the app.pug. This is like the main section for it. So it creates a section called name card. That's this right here. The login, which is a div, it has this little statement right here saying if you have a name, which is the cookie, it gives you welcome name. Otherwise, it's giving me the name card greeting hello student. Now in intro, I can reference that in a couple different places. That's how the blocks work. So you create a new file, say where it extends from, and then the block, this part right here, is referencing whichever part you put that same block. So it's saying all this text from this file will appear in this location. So this block main is coming from the layout.pug. It's saying it includes the header, but then the main content is going to be right here. So it's always going to print this kind of stuff. Like we could do essentially like an inception where if I were to do block more things, and then I were to create a new file, more things. Extends app.pug. And I go block more things. That just created a div with a class name of things. In Pug, you can do that. I can even create a div with like an ID of things if I wanted to. But for Pug, the default is what do you call it? If you just like kind of write either a class or an ID, it's going to just create a div. So it'd be the same like doing div dot things, something like that.
So block is in reference. Is that in reference to block level? elements in HTML, like HTML uses block, and then more things. Is that no? That's not the same thing.
No, this is a different. This here is using block in a different context. This is just using block to like a block of HTML, just like a
Sure.
a bunch of HTML. Yeah, it's different than like block level.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the way the templates work. It's like you've got that layout template that says, okay, my page is going to look like this. There's a header up here, and then like there's going to be some chunk of code here that I'm going to call main. And then the layout doesn't actually define what goes in main. It just defines like where main will be.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this app.pug we're in now, right? It says, okay, I'm going to extend layout. So I'm going to use everything that was in layout. And then it actually adds a definition and says, okay, and this is what's going to be in the main section of the layout. And so when those things get compiled together, Pug will take this definition for main and stick it in the place that the layout said main.
Right. Okay. Yeah. He just showed us that too.
App defines more blocks that it leaves undefined so that other views can extend app and define specifically what should go to those places.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So it's like the way I think about it is like a lot like Legos, where like you can build like a sweet Lego robot, but then you can still attach the head of the sweet Lego robot onto the bottom of a spaceship. So then it's a robot spaceship, but then you can attach that to a tractor, which is a robot spaceship tractor. And you can just keep on going on and on and on like that. So you have all these different like unique individual things that you can just kind of mash together, but then take apart. So it's very like segmented in a good way. That way. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else? Any parts that were unclear that I can try to help explain a little bit more in depth?
Seems like this treehouse tutorial was super useful. Sounds like you learned a lot going through it, and this is a nice app. It's nice to see like routes separated instead of just in one like giant routes file. To have your routes kind of organized by their purpose, where you've got sort of like your main login, logout routes in one place, and your everything having to do with the cards routes in another file.
Yeah,
it's nice. And you definitely will start to see that in more in larger applications and pretty much anything that's big enough to be useful in production. You're going to have more routes than you want to just dump in one giant file. The organization is really nice.
I mean, like my main struggle this entire time I've been at Learners Guild is kind of trying to wrap my head around like the client-server relationship and doing things with routes, printing things on a web page, just like that whole other than just like a single page application, even kind of like writing front-end code. But this tutorial kind of lays it out in depth, and I don't know, I feel like I know it put all the kind of floating pieces that were in my head kind of going every which way together into like one cohesive pattern that I can now understand and try to help explain to people. Yeah, no, I'd give this tutorial 2 thumbs way up.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing your code with us and walking through it. Yeah, I mean, it looks really good. I feel like you did a good job kind of giving us the tour through it and kind of going through in a logical progression. So, yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions before we wrap?
Questions, comments, feedback, anything is welcome. Please spit on me and call me ugly.
Emoji.
Did the tutorial? I think someone's asking a question. No? Okay. Did the tutorial take you through using Express Generator to set up your directory, or
Oh no,
no?
it
Nice.
you go through everything from scratch, which I thought was
Nice.
hella useful. So I actually understand what's going on with the Express Generator now, I'm able to read these different parts because it actually goes through like what the hell body parser.url encoded extended false means. It goes through why you're using app.use and why you only call the cookie parser function rather than doing any of that. Why you need to set your view engine, like what the view engine's doing, what the hell this is, like how to set up a error catcher, all the different things in Pug. It teaches you some pretty cool stuff with Pug, which I love. And like I've always struggled to find like a good Pug tutorial because Pug's documentation is just fucking awful. Like they really need to hire some creative writers to like figure out how to like explain it to people because like if they just literally said that whole like that Legos analogy, or they just gave me like something to work with other than just saying like, oh yeah, blocks do this, but then blocks don't work the way that they describe them. That shit was frustrating. So if you like actually go through this tutorial, this guy, he's a great teacher. He's a little silly. I watched it at 1.5 speed because he talks a little slow. So that's just something to look forward to. And it's about like 5 hours long, but it's a deep dive into Express, and it really helps you wrap your mind around like HTTP requests and everything like that too, which is a very important part.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that your app.js file looks so much cleaner than what I'm used to seeing it, because I'm used to using Express Generator and not
Mm-hmm.
knowing exactly what all of that is in there, and also never touching it. So I think it's super useful that you guys did this from scratch. It makes a lot of sense looking at it, and it looks just very like clean and useful.
Yeah, and like what he was saying essentially is all this part right here, this part that I have highlighted is considered essentially middleware. That's all middleware is just this function with a callback. And once he said that, my mind just exploded. Just breaking it down because it always looked so foreign and just weird to me. I didn't know how the hell to like succinctly describe what middleware was, or like point to like which part of my application. I'm just like, I think middleware is somewhere in this area. I think there's some middleware somewhere along these lines. But yeah, it's a great tutorial. And you go through a lot, and there's some pretty interesting challenges, such as turning all this HTML crap into Pug. That was a very interesting challenge.
Michael, do you mind pasting a link to that in the Face channel? I think maybe you did that the other day, but if you mind just
Oh yeah, no, I did. I'll do it again.
Yeah. Awesome. In case people dig into that. Feel like I had a question. Lost it.
Let's see if I can find it.
Could I give some feedback real quick too?
Michael?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, so I think what I'm noticing with you now and more is your explanations are improving and you're getting less nervous. But I know you're still really nervous, and I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of reinforce in advance of next week is that as long as you have a full understanding, and I also encourage you not to spiral out too much, because that's something I do too.
Yeah.
So once you've explained a concept pretty well and you're at the end point where it's like, that's it, that's what it does, just end it there. And let the interview maybe ask a follow-up question, which you can answer. So sometimes we tend to go in this thing where we spiral out. All of a sudden we're adding new words into our description that may not be relevant, which you didn't do, I don't think. But I just want to be cognizant of it, make us all aware of that. So once you describe a middleware, so it's a function that has a callback that takes a request response object, whatever you're describing it. Once you know that's what you know of it, end it there, and then let the interview like probe further, because that way you're not going too tangential.
All right, thank you, Phil. Some good feedback. Anybody else?
Yeah, awesome job, Michael. Thanks for being brave enough to do this in front of a group of your peers. I think I learned some things. I'm sure other people. Yeah, I think it's really helpful to do this and for you and for other people. So I really appreciate you doing that. And yeah, why don't we wrap it up there? And I will see y'all on the internet.
All right.